Thank you so much, Susan. Yes, so I'm the anchor mentor for this career cluster. What that means is I participated last year and I had a great time and I came back. So I'm helping kind of corral all our mentors. But before without further ado, let me have everybody introduce themselves. We're just going to do a quick, like 30-second elevator pitch about who we are, what we do, and maybe a bit about our time at Vassar. So Rose, Katrina, Scott, Eric, Danielle, take it away. Whoever wants to go first.
Great. Well, my name is Rose. I use she, her pronouns. Sorry. Danielle, were you going to go? Oh, no, sorry.
You're saying she didn't want to go first. So go carry on.
Okay.
Literally not it. So, go ahead.
I use she, her pronouns. I graduated in 2019. So just a year and a half ago. I majored in biophysics, the minor in math. I was on the fencing team. I was the captain of the fencing team. I did a whole bunch of research with ERSI, and right now I'm working as a research technician with Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And I'm studying place learning behavior and drosophilids. So and I run a whole bunch of experiments, and I'm working with our project technical resource team and the Gyroman lab. So if you guys have questions for what it's like to go straight from Vassar to like maybe a startup job or like an entry-level job, let me know.
I can go next. My name is Katrina Mateo, class of 2010. I was a biology major, English correlate while I was there, and also did a whole bunch of other activities, many of them really random. I just remembered that I was a co-founder of the Vassar Ballroom Club. Really random. Glad to still see. I think it's still active, or not as active just because of COVID. But also involved in orchestra, music, Asian Quilt magazine. So a couple literary things, music things, and performance. I have a master's and doctorate in public health, specifically in digital health, community health sciences, social sciences research. And I'm currently at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals as a patient innovation lead, helping to identify innovative or novel digital technologies that could be used in clinical trials. I'll send it to Scott.
Hi, everyone. My name's Scott Fleming. I graduated Vassar in 2005 with dual degrees in astronomy and physics and a correlate in computer science. I got my PhD in 2011 in astronomy, and I now work at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, Maryland. I work in the archives there, and so what I do is, along with a group of about 30 people, make sure that the data from more than 20 different NASA missions are available and accessible for researchers and the general public. Research-wise, I study extrasolar planets and stellar astrophysics.
I guess I'll go next. So my name is Eric, and I was a neuroscience major and English major at Vassar. And at Vassar, I also did orchestra. I was also in WVKR, and then also wrote for the Miss. And currently, I work at a nonprofit organization that's trying to get FDA approval for MDMA-assisted therapy. So my day-to-day is kind of like working with clinical sites on getting them set up for different studies, and also getting our studies through like FDA approval and through different regulatory bodies. And then I also have experience working at like a venture capitalist backed startup, and also in public health, and also in academia. And then I'll tag Danielle.
Hi everybody, my name is Danielle Chum, class of 2012. When I was at Vassar, I was a biology major and a French minor. I was also the president of the African Students Union. I have a PhD in cancer immunology, and I currently work as a medical science liaison for a cancer diagnostics company. I also have experience working in a startup, so if you have any questions about that, I will happily take them. And I think Maya, I'm popcorning to you.
Is me, yeah. So my name is Maya. Graduated 2017, majored in cognitive science, and also did a bunch of pre-med requisites for those of you interested on that path, although I am not in medical school. I am currently a master's student at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and I work with fish neuroethology, so learning a bit more about their sensory physiology and how they sense the world around them, kind of the broader field of sensory ecology. And then in addition to that, while I was at Vassar, I was a transitions mentor for 3 years. I was also participating in transitions as a freshman. I was a Questie, part of the Questbridge board, and I also was part of the orchestra and played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, that's me. Okay, so thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. And so how this is going to work is I'm going to take a bit of time to answer 2 questions which we feel are really important, kind of share some wisdom for you and things like that. So basically we'll answer 2 questions and then we'll open the floor. Oh, actually, before we do that, I want to do this little interactive thing just to get to know you guys a bit better. This is a bigger group, but if you could please in the participants tab, can you raise your hand if you are a bio major? All right, cool. Hands down. Can you raise your hand if you are a chemistry major?
Okay.
I'm realizing now that I think about it, probably a lot of you, raise your hand if you haven't declared a major yet.
Huh.
Okay, so we got, man, who's left?
Cog Sci?
Yeah,
Cognitive science.
Raise your hand if you're cognitive science. All right, it's a mix. Okay.
Interesting. Biochem, yes, of course.
Biochem, yep. Couldn't forget that.
The physics or astro people.
Astro, yes. Physics or astrophysics. Neuro.
Or
Ooh,
neuro,
yep.
yeah.
Neuro, okay.
Right, I can't
Others
just
words we might be forgetting?
I'm not sure. I think I'll move it to now just a broader question. Who's interested in going to graduate school? Oh, and that we have our almost.
There we go.
That's what I was. All right, cool. Just trying to see. We don't really get a chance to talk to you guys because it's such a big group. We'd love to know who we're talking to and kind of tailor it that way. But all right, so first of 2 questions that we'll ask all the mentors and have them answer in panel form before we get to questions. Why, or the why of your career? What drew you to the field, and what are the appeal and challenges?
I can give my my spark, as we like to call it sometimes. I decided to go into astro when I was in junior high school, and that was because of a confluence of 2 very important events in society in my life. One was the discovery of the first planet around another star, which was made in 1995. And then the other one was the re-release of the Star Wars movies, which was my first experience with those. And I gravitated towards the different creativity that was shown in those worlds with the different biomes and types of planets and everything. And that combined with the fact that we were finding these things in real life just inspired me to research more and more and go down that career path to ask those big questions. So that was sort of my spark there. And I chose Vassar because they had a very good department that let me get hands-on experience, and they have an amazing observatory with the Mariah Mitchell Observatory. And then one of my challenges, which I think a lot of other people may comment on as well, is in my field in the archive, we have to support so many different types of astronomers that the ability to be a sponge and really just explore lots of different topics is crucial, not just within physics and astronomy, but also outside, which is why a lot of us have multiple majors at Vassar and really explored those opportunities. Not just within astronomy, but also, with English and history and society and politics. They all play a role in the jobs we do, and the more we learn about them, the better we are at our jobs.
Yeah, I can go next. I didn't plan this. I didn't plan to end here at this particular role. This was a meandering path. I went to Vassar pre-med. I'm an immigrant, so you got to become a doctor or an engineer, or I don't know, a failure, I guess. So I went to Vassar pre-med, realized I didn't really love the pre-med requirements, or they didn't love me according to my transcript. Depends on your perspective. I think I just didn't like it. But then I met Jody Schwartz. I don't know if anybody knows Professor Jody Schwartz, but Jody run research on corals. And I mean, if you've seen Finding Nemo, everybody thinks corals are cute. So I was like, yeah, why not? This is cute. It's something to do for the summer. It'll show me a different world I never even planned on, which is the research world. And I remember at the end of ERSI, which was my sophomore summer, I told Jody I wanted to become a marine biologist, and she told me to hold up and that I loved research in her lab and not research in general. And that if I wanted to go to graduate school, I had to love research. I couldn't just love her lab and what she was studying. And so she encouraged me to, she said, what else do you find interesting in science? And I said, well, I've had an uncle who's passed away from cancer. I want to understand what it is. And she said, find a summer program that does cancer research. And that's what I did. And that's how I ended up in my getting a PhD in cancer immunology at the Roswell Park Cancer Institute, which is affiliated with the University of Buffalo. And now I work in a cancer diagnostics company, which is it's a 180 from what I was trained in, because I was trained, if you know anything about cancer, there's the tumor and then there are the cells around the tumor. In my PhD, I studied the cells around the tumor. They call them the stromal components, the immune system. And then there is the cancer itself. I currently work for a company that diagnoses the cancer itself, which is so different from what I was trained in. And so one of the main challenges I face in my job is pulling myself away from what I know and being comfortable with what I don't know. And being comfortable means I have to read a lot about cancer, the different genetics of cancer. And you would think that these two would be similar, but they're so different, just like my left and right hand are very different in their abilities. And the other thing is, because I work for a diagnostics company, I have to know FDA approvals and the regulations that come with it. And it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of, oh my God, it's so much information. As Scott was saying, there's a lot to know. I know Eric can speak a lot to the FDA and their idiosyncrasies. But yeah, so that is my why and my challenge. Didn't mean to call you out, Eric.
Eric, you want to go?
Yeah, sure, I'll go next.
Segues.
So yeah, I definitely didn't know much about clinical trials at Vassar, and I definitely I didn't even know there were like jobs in psychedelic therapy clinical trials when I was at Vassar. I just remember like taking a lot of like one thing that really like led to my interest in the field that I work in now is I took a consciousness seminar with Jay Bean. I don't know if he's still there. He might be retired at this point. But I took a consciousness seminar with him, and that's like when I first kind of learned a lot about like early psychedelic studies that were done in like monks in Germany and things like that. And basically, like after graduating, I worked in academia for a little bit. I wanted to work in like sleep and circadian neurobiology. And then kind of realized that it wasn't the career path that I wanted to take. I was getting kind of like fed up with like just like basic science and how it kind of like didn't think about more like structural problems. And so that kind of led me into working in public health, where I worked at a STD clinic in San Francisco, managing like their research program. And that's like kind of what got me into like learning about clinical trials and medical device trials and pharma trials. And after working there for a year, I got this like opportunity at a startup where they were trying to make an in vitro diagnostic flu test, and also kind of in vitro diagnostic tests for like hepatitis, for chlamydia, and for gonorrhea. And so I ended up working at that startup for like a year and a half, 2 years. And then things kind of went south at that startup. And so then I ended up getting laid off. And then in May of this past year, this opportunity opened up at this organization that I currently work at. And now I have been kind of working there since May, and my day-to-day really is like helping out like different clinical sites getting ready for clinical trials, working with regulatory agencies. So like working through like the FDA regulatory pathways, working with Health Canada, looking at different drugs, and then preparing like NDA applications. And then also working in psychedelics, you have to do a lot of like DEA submissions and also like Bureau of Narcotics. So yeah, that's kind of my day-to-day nowadays.
Yeah, so I actually was always interested in research. I was really lucky to go to a high school that had a science research program, so I kind of got into it a little bit early. I don't know if anyone knows about ISEF or NICEF if you were in New York, the Science and Engineering Fair, but it was a competition that our school in Queens, New York was part of. And so I actually started doing microbiology research in high school. And so I entered Vassar thinking I am going to be a pseudo pre-med track, because it's essentially the same courses you have to take to apply to a PhD program. And so I was 99% sure I was going to do microbiology. I want to do microbiology PhD. I love bacteria. My favorite bacteria is pink, Serratia marcescens. It really is pink. So definitely, if you want to look up a pretty bacteria, that's one to look up. But I was going through my courses. I was set to do that. And one summer I did a full-time fellowship doing microbiology research, and realized in that experience what I enjoyed most was talking about the implications of my science, of the research I was doing. What does it mean for population health, for community health? How does this research and the findings impact behavior and healthcare? And so I ended up making a switch midway through VAS, actually right after my sophomore year, from sort of microbiology to a macro level type of research, so population-based research, public health research. And that's when I started taking more interdisciplinary courses. And I think a lot of the other mentors nodded to that, the importance of taking courses outside of your primary study, because it allows you to see science and research through multiple lens. So it's taking courses like the philosophy of science, health, medicine, and public policy, bioethics, types of courses that were co-taught by professors in different departments. And that's when I was like, you know what, public health is, I think, where the direction I want to go. And I was able to bring my research skills, my sort of base knowledge of science and science research into public health. So yeah, and I think that's ended up leading towards doing a master's in public health, working in the field for a little bit. I thought my master's was my terminal degree, but quickly learned, like working in academia and hospitals, that I may need to pursue further graduate studies. So after working sort of in a hospital setting, academia, started a doctorate program, and while also doing full-time work more in the private sector. So eventually moved into more industry and the private sector. I'd say probably the biggest challenge, I think similar to what other people have said, is knowing what you don't know. I'm very much a qualitative researcher, mixed methods researcher. So I use surveys and qualitative methods to understand problems. But now I'm in a space that's heavily regulated. There's a big difference between NIH funded studies versus industry research and clinical trials that are heavily, heavily regulated. It's a whole new world for me. So even just understanding all the nuances of the FDA and the regulatory space is very new for me, as opposed to doing more community-based research funded by the NIH, that's publicly funded, government funded. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge. But I think part of it is knowing what you don't know and having the skills to be able to learn, even after X many years of school. It's constant learning. So, yep. Did everyone go? I think everyone went.
Oops.
Not quite. Rose, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So I showed up at Vassar thinking I wanted to do economics and history. And so, but when I showed up, I realized what I liked best about it really was about economics was really the math and the modeling stuff with math. So when I took a physics class and I took like multi and stuff, it kind of turned my priorities around. And I don't really know why I applied for ERSI, but I just did. And I got into a program with Professor Magnus from the physics and astronomy department and Professor Sussman from neuro. And that was incredible. It was really life-changing. I didn't know that research was a career option until I took that and until I talked to my professors about that. And so I thought I realized that I didn't want to choose a science major, and instead I just took everything and called it a biophysics major. So it was kind of a pre-med track, but with like the nice little label. I had some time to do field work with Ben Warren from the math department with modeling biological systems, and that really changed a lot of my thoughts. And by the beginning of my senior year, I was thinking to myself, I don't know what I want to study for a PhD. I want to do a graduate school eventually, but I don't know what I want to study. I know that research is what I want to do with my life. So I went and I talked to the CDO, and thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone there, because it really gave me a lot of good career advice. And I looked for I talked to my professors, I looked for entry-level jobs. I ended up getting an interview here at HHMI, and it's been history since. Now I want to study neuroscience for my PhD. I'm waiting until COVID is figured out a little more, because graduate school sounds really challenging to do linear distance and away from, social support. But yeah, it's been exciting here. I've learned a lot about neuroscience. I've gotten a lot better at coding. I've learned a lot more about different methods of science. I came from like a very physics-oriented background, and this has been kind of doing more bio stuff has really changed my perspective. But yeah, it's been really interesting.
All right, and I think that leaves me, so I'll try to keep it succinct. But yeah, so I came into Vassar, and just like Danielle said, it's like my parents are going to be a doctor, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm totally going to be a doctor. I'm totally into it. I love watching emergency medicine TLC shows, and that's obviously I want to be a doctor. So came in and doing all the prerequisites, and I happened to take John Long's class, biomechanics, my senior year as kind of a requirement, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't know what to expect your seminar, but I ended up doing like a really in-depth project on a neurine hearing, kind of looking at like how the ear structure is in frogs, and also just like a really cool example of a frog that had no inner ear but could still hear using like resonance chamber. Its mouth is a resonance chamber. It's the Seychelles Gardenier frog, if you're curious. It's the third smallest frog in the world. Anyways, so I left Vassar, and John was like, hey, I feel like you really like this. Have you thought about grad school? And I was like, nah, and I left. And I worked for 2 years as a medical scribe and an EKG technician. I realized I hated it. And I was like, I can't go to medical school. It's not an option for me anymore. I applied to graduate school. And thanks to John Long for writing me a really nice recommendation letter and some of the other experiences I had at Vassar, I got into the program, which I'm in now, which is the University of Minnesota Duluth's Integrated Bioscience Master's. So this is a 2 to 3 year program. And currently I work with a species called Astianus mexicanus, and it is a very cool fish. And I'm looking at the different parts of its physiology and related to its sensory ecology. Some of the challenges of getting into my field, I do feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping to getting into graduate school. I had to pay for my GRE. I had to pay for every application I turned in, except for a couple where they're like, we'll waive it for you because of your low income. So like that is problematic, I recognize, and it can be really difficult to jump in. And I guess other parts of it too is I'm definitely 100% struggling with trying to do time management and like having a fulfilling life. I'm kind of tied between TAing and taking classes and doing research and then just living. So I find myself spread kind of thin, and that's kind of a problem in the academia. I feel like it kind of just gets worse as you go up, but I'm still really love what I do. And I'm hoping that I can find better methods to like kind of keep myself grounded as I go up in the ranks kind of and go more towards like my PhD and then ideally an associate professor. So yeah, that's me. And thank you all our mentors for sharing on that first question. Now the second question is kind of breaks away from what we're talking about. So we're talking a lot about hard science or clinical trials or kind of like that deep science stuff, but we're going to talk a little bit about kind of our time at Vassar. And the question is, how do you feel that your Vassar liberal arts education has complemented your career paths? If anyone wants to get started on that one, or maybe take a pretty loaded question, and I think you'd be surprised just how helpful we think being at Vassar has been.
I feel like I think it's kind of assumed that if you're going into Vassar as a science major, like you go into Vassar as a science major and then you explore like the humanities and stuff. But I had kind of the opposite thing. I wanted to explore the humanities, and then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, science is the best thing ever. So I really think I have Vassar's liberal arts education to thank for my passion for science. I think also it's made me a stronger writer. It's I don't know, whenever I heard like, oh, liberal arts makes you a better communicator, a better writer, I was like, oh yeah, but everyone else can do that too. And it's really not the case. It is like science people struggle. um, so I think that was really great. And then I think also just as a human being, I can, because of the history classes and the religion classes I've taken, I can have a better understanding of people who are different than me, and I can talk to my coworkers from are from around the world, and so I can I have a little bit of common ground, and I can go further and ask them deeper questions, and it really facilitates my connections.
Thank you so much for saying that. That is so true. And it is frankly shocking. I was shocked to learn that not everyone learns how to communicate and write well in college. That's not common, unfortunately. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths of the Vassar education, liberal arts education, is that, you know, we have to hone our skills in writing and communication and listening and understanding other people's point of view and being exposed to different points of view. I remember taking one of my first courses that were more interdisciplinary outside of science was health, medicine, and public policy, I believe. And when one of the first, I guess, topics was looking at the different arguments of whether the world was round or not, and how there are scientists on both sides who have evidence and have done research, right, to make different arguments for either. And so, you know, recognizing that yes, there are facts, yes, there is science, right, but each of those points have context around them, have limitations to them. And I think that's part of what I loved about my education, and what I've come to realize really differentiates us from other colleges and other types of education is, you know, the roundedness, the holistic approaches to answering questions. Science and research is not linear, as much as we know that there's a scientific method, right, that, you know, portrays itself as linear. It's not. We all know that. And I think that's one of the beauties of the education here. And I love that you said you were taking other courses and the other extracurriculars that you did. Yeah, me being an intern in the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life and having to be on the Interreligious Council and saying like, oh, all these different religions have different experiences, cultures, things that are impacting their worldview. You know, those kind of experiences. I'm trying to think of others, but yeah, it's that liberal arts education really does mean something significant out in the workforce. Definitely distinguishes you from others.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. What I remember when I came to Vassar, I was very stiff in my thinking. I know this because one of my friends from Vassar, who I'm still friends with, she reminded me that I used to have a very hard stance on a very controversial topic, but she saw me change my mind after being at Vassar about it. And it was good to hear that, because I always thought I knew what I knew and I believed in what I believed in. And that came across in a lot of my conversations and made people uncomfortable. The people who agreed with me. But what I took from Vassar, that, you know, the education, it really does change how you talk to people. It changes how you come across to people. If it's obvious that you are somebody who can take different pieces of information and make an informed decision, that comes across in how you portray yourself in an interview, in a conversation. And that matters when people are hiring you, because yes, you might be, for instance, you might be interviewing for graduate school, but the person whose lab you're trying to go into, they're not looking at you just as a scientist. They're looking at you as, is this somebody I can work with? Is this somebody I can sponsor to go to conferences and they won't make me look bad? And that your liberal arts education comes across a lot in how you interact with, as Rose was saying, with different people's cultures, with different foods. Are you the type of person who's always turning down invitations because you're scared of trying new things? If you've gone to Vassar, you're definitely not scared of trying new cuisines or trying different, like, you know, taking advantage of JYA and learning all these different cultures. So all of that goes into making you a well-rounded human being as you go into, even especially into the sciences. There's this very terrible stereotype of what a scientist should look like, of how a scientist should behave. I 100% detest it so much. You are definitely more than what you do at the bench. And I think being at Vassar helps put you on that right path on that path towards being a well-rounded person. And also I was just thinking about it, that my job working at the gym helped me get over a lot of my shyness with talking to random people, because I would check people in at the front desk of the gym and they want to talk to you. I'm just like, go do your workout, but they want to talk to you. And now I'm very comfortable randomly going up to people and saying, hey, what's up? Let's talk about whatever you're talking about. And my current job requires me to do that. And I use those skills. So you never know what picking up from Vassar can help you in the future.
Yeah, I'll also just comment that, you know, for those, I think all the mentors here did double majors in very cross-disciplinary things. And in terms of your career as well, you know, a lot of the most exciting topics that are being pursued are at these intersections between cross-disciplinary sciences. And so if you have, you know, more than one passion, or you don't know yet, now is the time to explore it. And Vassar and the liberal arts education gives you the perfect opportunity to do so. The grim reality is that this is your last chance to do this. Once you proceed to do a full-time job or into advanced levels of degrees, your ability to try out things for fun is basically dwindled down just because of the reality of your time and your responsibilities. And it does get worse as you go up the ladder. And so you want to be able to try out new things so that you can devote your full-time attention to something you're passionate about. And also the big thing I also tell people is that it allows you your story. You know, in order to sell yourself as a undergraduate intern, or as a grad student application, or in a job cover letter, you want to have a one-page story that stands out. You're competed against people who are all also very smart, right? You're no longer in high school anymore, where a lot of you probably excelled. I mean, that's the reason why you're at Vassar, but now you're going to be competing against people who are all good and smart. And so being able to combine your passions into interesting ways and have interesting ideas and be creative and be able to express those ideas both from an oral presentation and written form. Communication is actually the secret most important skill for a scientist to have, for all those reasons, to get funding, to get opportunities. Those are all crucial to practice and to explore now while you have that chance, and figure out what you want to do. It's okay to not know what you want to do yet, but you don't want to squander these awesome opportunities you have.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everybody. And I guess I also just want to touch on like the storytelling aspect a little bit. Like when I said this like in the last panel, but like when I interview people, I love it when people tell me a good story. Like nothing bothers me more in an interview when people just read their skills to me. You know, like that really just like drives me crazy. Like I'd rather hear like a really well-crafted story, and that like getting to know you and your personality and having that shine through and making you seem like a very dimensional person. I think that's like something that I kind of look for when I do interviews. Another thing I think that I learned at Vassar that I thought was really helpful for me is just like not being afraid to challenge ideas or people or institutions. Like in your career, you're gonna meet like people who are very well established in their careers, but they also have to learn new ways of doing things. And I think that's like one thing that I learned in college, where it's like, there's always so many different ways to do things, and you always want to question why we do them. And if there's a way we can make things better, I think that's something that being at Vassar has taught me, is to always keep an open mind and not be afraid to change things if they need to be changed.
Yes, I think all the mentors did a fantastic job of explaining it. I don't want to like beat a dead horse. I'm sure you guys like, yes, we know Vassar makes us well-rounded. We're all spheres, yeah. But no, you should really be appreciative of the fact and just understand that not everyone has the same opportunities that you do at other institutions. I've talked to students at the current institution I am, which is not an R1, but just I asked them like, why are you taking your classes? They're like, it's required. So I gotta just take all these classes. I have to do my gen eds and it's Vassar does provide a really interesting opportunity for you to just try things because you're interested in them and they have nothing to do with what you're doing right now, but you learn a lot more about the world that way. I just think about how that one class I took my senior year ended up being a really pivotal time in me choosing my career and sparking an interest. And you don't really know until you try it. And yes, 100%, like Scott said, like you don't get a lot of chances after this to really just try stuff for fun. Like my sophomore year, I was like, I'm gonna try like netting owls for fun. Do feel because that sounds cool. Like, wow, if I had time to net owls right now, or even play an instrument like I used to at Vassar, that also has gone by the wayside. My poor oboe is picking up dust, but that happens. It just as you go, you kind of start with this really broad framework, and you're able to narrow it down kind of as you go up into your career. But right now, you're in that broad, really like who knows what's going to happen framework time, right? You like the whole world is open to you. And slowly but surely, as you try new things, you're going to start closing some doors and you'll narrow your path and you'll have a better idea of it. But you should like enjoy the ambiguity of where you are right now. And also just like remember that Vassar really, it's not just about science. Science is so much more complicated. It's a people work in it inherently. Like there's so many other dynamics to consider and you have an opportunity to really explore that. So yeah, hope that wasn't too much like you're special because you go to a liberal arts place. Like, just understand, we're really psyched about it, like genuinely. Okay, thank you all the mentors for sharing. And now we're gonna open it up. This is, we do this for you guys. You guys excite us and get us energized. We want to hear from you. So please feel free to either raise your hand if you'd like to say something and ask a question in person or put it in the chat. And we're happy to spend some time before we go into those breakout rooms of us individually. So just as a reminder too, you will have 20 minutes with us individually. So if you have very specific questions, maybe wait for that. But right now, if you have any questions for the panel, we're here to share our wisdom and experiences with you. So please go right ahead.
Do we have Jeopardy music?
I'm kind of trying that thing that I do in my TA classes where I just kind of stare at my students until they say
I was going to say wisdom is questionable. Experiences maybe. Wisdom, not sure. Not so sure.
No questions.
While we're waiting, just so we can have something to talk about, I'm curious, what was for the mentors at least, what was the class you took that was the most different from your primary major? And if you have any thoughts about how it helps you in your own lives, Oh, we have a question. Good.
All right.
Maybe pocket that for now. But
yeah, but that's good thought though. We'll keep that. What research did you do at Vassar and how did you get into that? Yeah, actually someone asked this in the last one. This is a very popular one. Does anyone want to take it away?
I can start. I did, does anybody know Professor Jody Schwartz in this cohort, in this cluster? No? Oh yeah. So Jody works on sea anemones. She studies coral. Well, when I was there, she was studying coral bleaching. And I'd heard of it. I mean, everyone knew what was going on in the Great Barrier Reef at the time because of increasing global sea temperatures. So Jody was working on sea anemones and trying to understand the science behind coral bleaching. And at that time, the hypothesis, one hypothesis was that it was an immune response where, because if you know anything about corals, you know that a coral it's a relationship, it's a symbiosis between a plant and an animal. And the plant gives the animal the color that we all see, the gorgeous colors we see in coral reefs. And one of the hypotheses was that whatever limerence period was going on between the animal and the plant had been broken apart because of increasing global temperatures. So then now the animal was seeing the plant as an enemy and expelling it in an immune kind of response. And so that's how I got introduced to the whole concept of even what the heck is an immune response. I only know my immune system doesn't work when I'm sick. Otherwise, who cares about my immune system? wrong, 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 wrong. And that was how I parlayed into studying about the immune, response in cancer. And when I interviewed for grad school, I brought that up. I said, I was trying to understand what how does a coral expel something that helps it, got introduced to the immune system, and that's why I'm interested in your program. And that's how I parlayed an experience at Vassar into grad school.
I can go next. Oh, go ahead, Scott. You wanna go?
Sorry, I was going to say I kind of worked my way up the internship chain a bit. I did a summer internship with a professor of astronomy named James Lombardi at Vassar as part of, they have this thing called the Keck Northeast Astronomy Consortium, which is a group of 6 or 7 liberal arts colleges in the Northeast that have essentially like a mini conference. So you can do a research project at these other schools over the summer. They're not too far away from Vassar, and it's much smaller scale than a professional meeting would typically be. And you get a lot of good practice, first of all, doing research, because at least for me, the books stop soon after grad school when you're done with classes, and you get into the realm of we don't have answers to look up. We have to figure them out ourselves. And so getting practice on research, on presenting a poster at a conference, networking, meeting other people was a lot easier to do when most of the people there were other undergraduates of my age and skill sets. And then I ended up doing an internship at Space Telescope, where I work now. Then flash forward 10 years after that, and I'm back here as a full-time astronomer. So, I kind of did research that way, and it was really valuable because it let me, my first presentation wasn't in front of 1,000 people, it was in front of 20 people, and most of them were kids or students, and not all professors. So
Yeah, I actually did something similar. I unfortunately, because I was interested in microbiology when I started, and there wasn't a microbiology professor, I didn't do any research while I was in undergrad. Actually, David Esteban, he's still at Vassar, I believe. He had just started at Vassar when I was there, so he was just getting his lab started. But instead, I did a summer fellowship at Dartmouth, and that was when I did my first full-time wet lab research in microbiology. And kind of similar to what Scott was saying, it culminated in a sort of a mini symposium for students in the program and other students in other summer programs. And so, my first experience like doing posters outside of what I did in high school, doing research, writing about it, presenting it, learning those communication skills, presentation skills. But the other experience, kind of doing research, is a little different. I did field work. At the time, it was called field work. I believe it's called something different now. But I was working on a project with the Dutchess County Department of Health. And what my role was to support a project that was trying to understand the health needs and healthcare experiences of Dutchess County residents. But the way that data was collected was paper pencil survey with people like me at the DMV in Dutchess County, trying to get people to complete this like 15-minute survey with me. Needless to say, that was very difficult, and I didn't understand at the time how this could possibly help my career, or how I could gain anything from this except like learning not to bother like moms with 3 kids that were sitting at the DMV. They probably won't respond to your survey right away. But what I actually realized further down the line was that kind of real world experience and actually going up to people and meeting face to face to people who are the participants in studies, who provide data for research studies. You get to see the humans on the other side, and they're not just data points, they're not just ID numbers, but these are people who are living their lives, and they may skip questions because they're not comfortable. They may not understand because of health literacy issues. Maybe the survey wasn't designed in a way that is inclusive, that is health literate for different populations. And it makes you think about research, how yes, research is meant to test hypotheses and derive fact, right? But there's also missingness of data that can affect your results. There's representativeness, right, that can impact your results. And that's a big problem in clinical trials, in academic research, on who is in these studies. So it kind of actually ended up giving me a different lens on research and putting into context, which is why, you know, as much as I love Excel, I love like analysis to a certain degree. What I really love is doing one-on-one interviews, collecting that qualitative data that is just so rich with experiences and can provide a wealth of data that can inform your hypothesis, or, you know, give you data to, you know, create hypotheses. So that ended up being a really interesting experience while at Vassar, which I didn't appreciate at the time, but I definitely do now. And I understand when I send research assistants out into the field to collect data, I'm like, I realize this is going to be hard. You will have to talk to people. You will have people turn you away, but here are some tips. Now I was able to understand that experience and can translate that when I do sort of other types of community-based research.
So when I was at Vassar, I was working on research with ERSI with Professor Magnus and with Professor Sussman. And the big project there was studying dynamic diffraction of C. elegans. So we put a C. elegans, a tiny little microscopic worm, in front of a laser beam. The light would bend around it and diffract, and it would make this little pattern. And then we would study, because it diffracts in a very specific way, we would reconstruct the image of the worm from that diffraction pattern. And that taught us a little bit about the motion patterns. It taught us a little bit about the certain neurons in C. elegans that are responsible for producing motion patterns called a gait. And so that was really interesting. The reason I got into that research originally by just seeing ERSI as a thing and applying to it. Before that, I think some stuff that really helped me is that I had a very broad curriculum. So going into it, I had comp sci, I had intro bio, I had intro comp sci, intro bio, intro physics, intro math. And when I showed up, I said, like, I'm not specified in this, but I have a lot of knowledge and I can help out with like maybe the bigger picture. And one thing I think that also set me apart was that before I applied to each of the positions in ERSI, I went to each professor and I talked to them about their project. And I got rejected from some projects, and that kind of hurt. Like, that kind of made me sad, but, you know, someone said yes, and that was really great. And I think that extra effort of just like having a face of the application made a really big difference. I think another thing too, as I listen to people talk about applications for jobs or for internships, having like seeing if you can get your way into a face-to-face conversation, whether it's in person or on Zoom or something, really gives you an advantage, because, you know, you're a face and we're social creatures. So a face with an application is a lot stronger than just a piece of paper.
So when I was at Vassar, like Vassar admittedly doesn't have as many like human research kind of opportunities, which was like kind of what I was mostly interested in back then. But I first started doing research with Susan Trombetta in the psychology department. So we're doing like some behavioral genetics research projects, working with like large data sets. So that was kind of what when I started learning about like the IRB and kind of like the ethics that kind of come into working in human subjects research. And then shortly after that summer, I got an internship at Brown University doing, working in like a sleep lab there, where I like was doing like studies with adolescents and getting some data collected for like a grant. And then when I came back, I started working in Dr. Megan Gull's lab in sensory ecology. And so like here I was like working with birds, and I just remember like I'd have to like wake up at like 5 a.m. in the mornings to go to the farm and like try to like catch some birds, and then like bring these birds back to Olmsted to run some of these auditory experiments. And then that was kind of like when because I was like her first advisee. And so that was a really great learning process for me in terms of getting like a head start to doing research, just because I was in charge of like designing my own experiments And like when experiments fail, it was honestly all just like my fault. Like I had no one to blame but myself when my experiments failed. And that taught me a lot about like that trial and error, like taught me a lot about like creating like new clinical research studies and research design and things like that. And I also remember having to like analyze all my own data, which was really daunting for me because I had to learn how to use SAS and like learn to code some things. Um, but then I was able to kind of like publish some of my results, and that taught me a lot about like the scientific publishing kind of structure and how to like talk to reviewers and talk to journals and things like that. And then when I was graduating, I wanted to kind of go back into human subjects research. And I thought like having my experience working in Dr. Bell's lab was really good because I was able to kind of spin a lot of the electrophysiology techniques that I learned and how they can apply to like electrodes for humans. Um, but yeah, I just remember like emailing her, and then she said that she had an opening, and that's how I joined her lab.
Yeah, and just as a sidebar, if you can get published as an undergrad, woohoo, that's really cool, but also you totally okay if you don't. I'd say that's usually a rare thing, but really awesome if you can put that on your resume. All right, my research story.
Really quickly, just to add on what you were saying, even if you're not a first author or second author, even helping with any kind of manuscript, learning what the process is to write a manuscript, invaluable experience. So if you're like an acknowledgement or helped with analysis or proofread, it's still a valuable skill to know what that process is like. Sorry, continue.
Okay, and I do see there's another question, so I'll keep my kind of summary of my research really succinct, even though it's not a succinct process. So I actually bounced around like 3 different places for research at Vassar. So at Vassar First, if anyone knows Glenn Proudfoot, he used to teach bio when I was there. Oh wow, another question. We'll get to them, I promise. So he used to teach bio when I was there, and he does work with Saw-Whet Owls. So I was just, you would get a credit, and then you could go and it'd be awkward long car ride to our field site. We'd set up some mist netting, and then we'd catch some owls and then go home. And we do like morphometrics. After that, I was trying to get into a lab, which I'm not going to name the person because they're a fantastic person. They do fantastic research. It just didn't work out between us. I was really busy, and they were like, "Hey, so I'm more interested in students that I can keep around from like in order to do a thesis with." And I was in a different department entirely in Cog Sci, and they're like, "This is going to be kind of difficult. I don't know if it's a good fit." And that's the case, you know, you will get rejected, and that's okay. I did spend about 6 months learning some techniques, but ended up not doing big research there. And then I'd say my biggest research project was while I was both my junior and senior year. So I did my own thesis, and I did a lot of work with, I learned some electroencephalography techniques. There's like this crazy net that you put over your head with Jan Andrews, and also did some perceptive studies just with language. And so more than 90% of my project was trying to figure out the code in order to make the program do what I wanted. And everyone's like, "That's not science. Like, you can't even get the code to work." I'm like, "No, this is the science. Trust me. When nothing goes right, that's the science, my friend." So yeah, but it really just, how did I get there? A lot of it was just bugging my professors after class. Ken Livingston, my freshman year, I took a class with him, and I literally just followed him like around and talked to him a lot, and would even follow him like as he left to his car, like after class. Like I was no boundaries. But it also, I was memorable, and he did chat with me a lot. So definitely like talk to your professors. Usually they'd be willing to chat with you. All right, so let's see, we got a couple other questions. We'll do the first one. In your experience, what is the best way to approach a professor or employer about getting involved in your research? Okay, I'll just finish my tail end then.
Follow them to their car.
Yes, follow
Scott's like, "No, don't do that."
Maybe, no, don't fall into the car, but just like shoot an email like, "Hey, I read your paper on XYZ, and I think that's really cool. Can we chat about it?" Like, don't say like, "I want to do research with you." Like, kind of enter a conversation, and then they'll be like, "Oh, by the way, I do this research." And you can be like, "Wow, I'm actually really interested in that. Do you have any, what is your advice?" And typically that, like, people love to see enthusiastic students, and will totally take you on as long as you have the enthusiasm and the foresight to like learn a little bit about it and be able to do some talking points. Anyone else want to take it?
Yeah, I can combine the 2 questions and answer them. So please raise your hand if you have a LinkedIn profile. Yes. Okay, great. So right now, with the world we're in, it's very virtual, as opposed to when I was in college and I could just go visit someone's graduate school after sending an email. So if you have a LinkedIn profile and there's someone you're interested in, click the person's name, and usually LinkedIn will tell you if there is a Vassar alum who knows this particular person. If you are shy about contacting the person directly, if you contact a Vassar alum, they're not gonna say, no, we're not gonna introduce you to this person, because a Vassar alum knows the quality of the education you're getting at Vassar. And so we are okay with recommending you for something because we know you're not gonna make us look bad. So the importance of networking here is use your Vassar connections as hard as you can. It is deep. Your Vassar connections are very, very, they're deeper than you can imagine. So check if the person you're interested in, if they're connected to a Vassar alum at all, and even in the smallest amount, and see if you can get an introduction. If you cannot, I know a lot of researchers who live on Twitter, and I know it's wild, but slide into their DMs. I'm not kidding. I know people who've gotten postdocs, who've gotten research opportunities after college, because a professor posted something on Twitter and they were like, yeah, I want to be a part of it. They got a meeting, and there you go. They have a research opportunity for a year. So, and when you approach them, you have to be very respectful. Don't just cold email them with the same email you're sending everybody. You like to feel special, they also like to feel special. So make sure your email is very specific about their work. Say why you're interested in their work. That's what catches their eye. That's their passion. That's their life work. So acknowledge that in your message, and that shows that you've put in time and effort into researching what they do, and that you respect what they do. And what that makes you look like is, it makes you look like somebody who's hardworking and diligent. And that's what they want. That's the kind of person they want in their lab. So I think that answers the two questions. I hope it does.
So I can offer my own perspective. Keep in mind, of course, that we're a very different field, so things might be a little different. But I fully agree with the emails. By the way, I did that too when I was looking for grad schools, and it is one of the reasons I got into grad school. I would actually recommend doing a 2-paragraph approach, no more. And the first paragraph is 3 or 4 sentences along the lines that other people said, which is, I see you do research in this and this. I'm really interested in this. Can you tell me more about your project? No scientist in the world is not happy talking about what they do. You'll have more trouble shutting us up than not. So start with that. Be honest about it, obviously, and do your homework. Research what they're doing. And then I would say, don't be afraid in the second paragraph to say, I've done this and this. I'm really interested in any potential research opportunities you might have in the future. Definitely don't demand anything, but let them know you're active, because the other dirty secret is that people share other people's resumes all the time. And so even if the professor you reached out, it doesn't have an opening in the summer, they very well might pass on to another professor who might have one in a field that you would be as interested in doing. And then the other short trick I have maybe, and this is obviously not relevant in the quarantine, but when we get back to more in-person stuff, is whenever you go to a lecture of someone you're interested in getting to know, stay afterwards. And usually they will invite people to sort of come up and say hello and maybe ask a follow-up question one-on-one, just for 5 minutes or less. And a lot of times you give a presentation and everyone just leaves and you're like, well, that was good. We remember the people who come up afterwards and say hello. At least I do. And it's intimidating, I know. It's a skill that people have to work on, myself as well, but nothing sticks out more than a student who comes up just to say hello, great talk, ask one more follow-up question. And those connections can happen in simple things like that too sometimes. Because we kind of secretly expect people to ask questions after we're done talking. And the worst thing when we give presentations is when we do this and there's no questions. So get practice on that, I guess. It's a skill.
Yeah, definitely 100% everything that you said. It is weirdly, it's a weird phenomenon that we do want to have people ask questions, because if no one asks questions, then it just seems like no one was interested in our topic. And that's the worst thing for a scientist's ego is to be with people who don't care about your topic or your area of expertise. Yeah, definitely. I think, I'm a person that never liked networking. I never thought I was good at it. I was always scared of it. I never felt I had a good enough question or a smart enough question to ask. And it really wasn't until I took qualitative methods when I turned that skill into a skill for networking. And what I mean by that is, in qualitative research, it's not about you, it's about the other person, and trying to ask them about their story, their experience. And that I end up like thinking of networking as I'm basically doing one-on-one interviews with this other person. I want to understand, I want to learn more about what their work is and translate it into my interests. And so has been like my little sort of secret tool to help me get over my sort of fear of networking, is making it more about the other person and learning about the work that they're doing, assuming that it's interesting to you and you want to learn more about it, right? So definitely kind of like other people that are doing your homework, looking at the type of the research that they do, asking questions about their research. Actually, my first job, I just remembered I didn't actually apply to that job. I actually applied to one of their colleagues' job to be part of their research team. And it wasn't a good fit because I didn't have a strong psychology background, but he knew a colleague who was doing weight management intervention research and referred my resume to her. And I ended up working for her for 3.5 years. My first like full public health intervention research that taught me a lot. So yeah, it's 100% true. Resumes are passed around. We remember people. If you just had a conversation just to learn and talk more, if you follow up in a year and say, hey, I'm on the job market now, we're more likely to respond to you and pass your work around because we've had a conversation with you before, as opposed to someone just cold calling and being like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you know anyone? Right. So definitely building those relationships over time. Yes, they take effort. Yes, they take time. Yes, it can be nerve-wracking. But the more you do it, the more you practice, the better you get at it. And you become a little more comfortable, but it's a skill. It's something you have to practice. And it does get easier over time.
The other real quick lightweight trick I have is, if you're not comfortable, come to somebody one-on-one, get some friends, go to a talk with 2 or 3 people and go up as a group. And don't maybe have 25 people mob somebody, but find a wing person or 2, and that's totally acceptable and even better. And you want to be able to have a small enough group that they'll remember who you were, but it really can help with some of the social pressure of having to talk with somebody who's a senior and a stranger by yourself. Get 2 or 3 friends who are interested in the same topic and go up as a little group and each ask a question, and then maybe you'll get a little more comfortable and be more willing to do that by yourself over time. And that costs nothing but just having some friends to go to the same talk together, even if they just are sitting next to you quietly. And they're not even in science. Get an art buddy to come and listen and have them come up with you. That's all okay.
Secret. It's actually really flattering to us to make it seem like there's a lot of people coming up to you to ask questions.
And I mean, nowadays everything is virtual, which is tiring, but is also an opportunity for you to literally go around the world listening to so many people's talks. And a lot of these researchers publish they publish their diaries basically, so you can figure out where they're giving a talk, and you can log in and listen to them. I want you to disabuse yourself of the notion that a question is silly. There is no silly question. Just ask it. A lot of people sometimes even forget the fundamental of what they're talking about because they've been studying it for so long. They've forgotten that question you think is easy. And by you asking them, you actually remind them of the tiny joy that got them started in the first place. So if there is somebody you're interested in, use the internet to see if they're giving a talk anywhere. Hop onto that Zoom or whatever platform it is, and then ask a question. And if they answer it and they share their contact information, when you email them, reference the talk they were at and say, I was the one who asked you this question. It made me interested in this. I would love to hop on a quick 15-minute call just to talk to you some more about your research and how I might be interested. That is that is juice for scientists. You came to our talk, you remembered us, and you're sending us a love note. Oh yes, we will hop on the Zoom with you. So yeah, egos. Scientists have big egos. Just don't be. It's true. We love hearing people love our stuff. So yes, take advantage of that.
So something I wish I knew, I guess, like before I went into research is NIH Reporter. I'm gonna post the link in the chat here. But basically this is a database of all like government awarded grants. So like you can kind of search up a PI that you're interested in based on their funding availability. So if you care about getting paid for your work, this is something that I would highly, highly recommend and wish I knew kind of going into it. And in terms of networking, I would say like networking is one of the most important things you can do in like after graduation. Like one thing that like even for me recently is like the importance of like just building and growing your own professional network. Like a diagnostic company that I worked with a couple of years ago previously. Like I was like helping them set up a lot of their trials. And then I actually just got like a recruiter call recently that they're growing their clinical team. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Who is this company? And then I realized I already know the CEO of this clinical team. And so like knowing like your network and knowing your field and your industry and like kind of like the industry norms and how to network are really important. Especially like in like the field I work in is like admittedly very, very cliquey. Like people in my field, like if you work in clinical and regulatory, like you develop like a reputation, and like people in my field tend to like to work with people that they already know their work style, just because there's so much communication involved. There's so like even when I like go to different companies, it's like I always tell my teammates about opportunities. I'm always trying to get them into my field as well, because like there's just like the quality of work can speak a lot. And then the other thing I wanted to add to is like, whenever you do an interview and someone asks you, like, do you have any questions? That's actually a trick question. You should have questions and you should ask really good questions because like that actually is what can make you really stand out as a candidate, is like the quality of the questions that you ask.
I guess in my experience, I think something that's unique to Vassar are really small class sizes. And so the way that I got to my professors was that I participated in class. Like, I don't know, even like these awful morning classes, I would still be raising my hand and participating and going to their office hours. And then that kind of established like a rapport with us, you know, like Maya, you were talking about John Long, like he got me this job. I love him so much. He's so perfect. But when it comes time to do a job search or to look for internships, like having someone who can go to bat for you and recommend you to other people in the field, post like students that they did research with way back when, it's really important. And it also, I'm a little more shy, so having someone open the door for me instead of just cold emailing them, like having an introduction really made a difference. And I think it makes them listen more. So I think that having a professor on your side, even if you're not doing research for them, but they can vouch for your hard, like how hard you work and how hard, like how intelligent you are and stuff. And that was like, it was just really helpful for when I was looking for stuff. And yeah, networking is super important in science. I think that everyone else here would like agree is like, it's important for collaborations. It's really important for like your next opportunity and everything. Yeah, it's really important. Yeah.
That actually reminds me really quick that in terms of networking, I was not great at organic chemistry. I was not. It actually one of those classes that reminded me, like, maybe you're not cut out to do this. But my professor, Chris Smart, love him to death. He was the person I developed a relationship with in mentoring, and he recognized that even though I wasn't good at organic chemistry, I tried really hard. And that's almost an example of like, in the face of challenges, like, do you try, do you work hard, do you look for other resources, do you go to the professor? He has been a reference for me for many years. Probably he didn't write a recommendation for my PhD because it was too far away, but for my master's, for my first job, he was one of my references because he could speak to, even though it didn't come naturally to me, organic chemistry, the other skills that came through, the willingness to try. And so developing those relationships with professors, even if you didn't do research with them, even if you weren't a student in their class, if you showed that you tried, that you had developed a relationship with the professor and did try your best, that can be a contact too that can help you with references later. Sorry.
No, that was it. No, I was just gonna wrap it up. Yes. Yeah, I was just gonna move on to just see if anyone else had any other questions. We do have some more time. Yeah, I think we do have a bit if anyone has any other questions. You know, this is your time, so feel free to ask. Otherwise, we're gonna go to Scott's question about like weird classes that we took. Anyone have anything?
Oh, we could address the second part of the question. I think it was like, what would you say on the most important, what would you say is the most important type of experience to have on your resume? Maybe talk.
Ooh, that's, yeah, I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and answer that one. I guess I can talk a little bit. It says, what would you say is the most important type of experience to have on a resume? Any advice about what employees look for on a resume? I guess maybe Eric, I feel like you were looking at resumes. Maybe you want to say you got it from the other side.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about. Well, honestly, like with resumes, like I know they tell you not to plagiarize anything in college, but with a resume, you basically want to make that as similar to a job description as possible. Because what happens is, well, not only does like, it depends on like what kind of system they have. So like a lot of employers have just like an algorithm that just reads your resume through. So like if you don't even have the keywords, your resume won't even be acknowledged. And additionally, on a resume, you're just asking about just resumes, right? So just like resumes are very industry specific. So like, obviously, like if you're doing a design kind of field, you want to have like a very flashy resume. In my industry, like it's better to just have nothing like too flashy. And just like I like to just see like the facts. And also like when you're writing a resume, it's really important to add in metrics. So you want to put in things with numbers. You want to do things with products. So instead of being like, I studied fish right now, you know, it's like, I studied these type of fish, yielded these type of results, maybe use these kind of techniques, which led to this type of result. So like when you're writing your resume, those are some things you want to think about because like you want to create like dimensionality in your application. And then let's see, I'm trying to think of other things. So numbers are also really good. So like if you like say like I worked on 3 research projects, make sure you put the number 3 in there. I think those are really good visual tools that kind of help an employer quantify things and kind of figure out like how much time you spent on things. If you worked on things with like a really large budget, I would always put like the range of a budget, for instance. And then also use action words. So you like use strong verbs at every single bullet point that you use. And then keep your skills section very concise. So it's like everyone probably has Microsoft Word, but if you have like Python experience, if you know SQL, those are things that can also kind of highlight your application. I don't know, those are just some things I can think of off the top of my head.
Yes to everything that Eric said, especially the action words. For those of us who've done research in people's labs, it's, you know, of course you write the name of the project that you were working on, but what's more important is what you did on that project. So you don't just say worked on, you know, this project name with this PI, right? That's great, but I'm not going to necessarily go through the work of looking up who the PI is and like what they do. What I'm more interested in is what you did during that time with that PI on that project. So if you led something, if you supported, if you developed a manuscript, if you honed skills in certain laboratory not redundant laboratory skills, or if certain types of analyses, if you have to develop the protocol, anything along those lines, it makes it more tangible what was actually done in that role, rather than just that you worked on a project or you worked in a certain person's lab. I think the other part I want to also add is, and especially coming out of undergrad, or if you're still in undergrad, you may not have a ton of experience, like work experiences, but that's where, at least for me, I do also look at the volunteer experience or extracurriculars, because if you were president of a club or any type of leadership, or if you were part of a club that does community service in some degree and you plan an event, those are opportunities to highlight other skills that are still, that are potentially still relevant in the type of roles that you're going to be applying for. You can highlight organizational skills, planning, writing, facilitation of meetings, for example, fundraising. Those are the other kind of skills that you can highlight through your extracurriculars and volunteer experience, even if you don't have a ton on your work experience side of your resume.
And I would just like to add that if you're, I think part of the question addressed graduate school. If you're going straight out of undergrad to graduate school, you won't have even a third of the skills that you're going to need for your actual research. And the professors, they know that. But there is an adage in my local language that says, your beauty will take you to the palace, but your mouth will bring you back home. If you don't know how to sell yourself, because in graduate school, yes, you're supposed to be smart, but you're going to be working with these people for 6.5 years, depending on which field you go into. If you go into biology, yes, that it's going to be a long relationship. And so these people have to like you. They have to like being around you. And right now, a lot of things are virtual. So you have to be able to talk about yourself. You have to be able to, as Eric was saying earlier, a narrative. Don't just list your skills, talk about it, take them through your journey and let them feel like they were there with you. And it's hard, and it takes practice. There's no way you're gonna get it right the first time unless you've practiced with somebody in your life, with a friend. Call up a friend and give them a bunch of questions and have them ask you and see how you respond in those situations. Because you might have a great resume, but if you can't defend it, you're not gonna get the gig you want. So practice learning how to talk about yourself. You're not bragging, you're talking about your accomplishment. Heck, you're bragging, brag, you've done this stuff, brag about it. But learn how to talk about it so that you're a mix between proud of what you've done, but also willing and available to learn the rest that is available to be learned. That's the kind of mix you want to be whenever you're interviewing for these things. So please practice your interviews. Just practice knowing how to talk about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses. Don't just copy the answers the internet tells you about your weaknesses. I'm sure Eric can talk about that. Think about what your real weakness is and talk about it, and don't just list it. Talk about what you're doing to fix it and to be better. You're not going to be the strongest person at everything all the time, but are you willing to learn? Are you willing to be better? Say that in the interview. So that's what I will add.
Yeah, I feel kind of ridiculous sharing this as well, but one thing I actually kind of find really useful is TikTok. So there's actually a lot of really great resources on TikTok, and actually a lot of Silicon Valley founders and VCs have their own TikTok channels where they actually offer some really great advice on interviews, but also kind of starting your own businesses, and also thinking about entrepreneurship, angel investing. So there's a lot of actually great resources. I mean, take this with a grain of salt, obviously, but I actually think there's some really great resources out there on TikTok.
One thing I want to also highlight in interviewing, and to Scott's point about the cover letter also, I think absolutely the weaving your story, I think that's a big component. But one thing I would say is also to differentiate between the use of I versus we in interviewing. People who come from the scientific field, especially, I'm so sorry about the horn outside. There's this tendency in writing is to say we did this. And I will say that is often more of a language trait that tends to come out more with women, females in general. So I think there's that fine line between bragging, but also talking about what you actually did. So what I try to do when I'm interviewing or when I talk to people who are interviewing is recognize how often they're using I versus we. I can be very powerful. But at the same time, there's very rare instances where everything that you've done is solely you. So there are some things that you should highlight as like, I took lead, or I led this project, or I wrote this manuscript, or whatever the case is. But then there's also situations where, you know, we did this as a team. I supported, I learned, I was being mentored in this role. You know, I helped, you know, review this manuscript or whatever the case is. So I think having that balance of I versus we kind of also positions you as someone who's willing to learn and also be part of a team. But there are also instances where you do take lead and take ownership of projects and show that initiative as well. So I think there's a balance between the two.
Just to reemphasize a point I made in the chat about the cover letters too. In academia, it's usually a little different than industry, where they do rely on those sort of machine learning languages to process stuff. A lot of times in academia, we are reading them by eye, and I have to read 60, 70 of these things. And so you need to have a CV and a resume with your academic institution accomplishments and all those others, your skills, but I gloss over them because honestly, they're usually all the same. What I read first, and honestly, usually the only thing I read carefully, is your cover letter, where you need to tell me a little bit more about what you've done, what your skills and passions are, and how it fits the specific job or internship or application you're applying for. And a good cover letter is the make or break. I put a good cover letter that has diverse skill sets, that's tailored to the specific job application. By the way, we know when it's not, and it's very obvious, despite how good you think you might be in doing that, at the top of my pile every time. So I would say, if you're, again, looking for more academic routes for internships or grad school applications, make sure you have your CV and resume and make sure it's up to date and polished and comprehensive, but work twice as hard on your cover letter. Have advisor you trust at Vassar read it, because they've looked at these two a lot, and edit it multiple times, and practice it, because that within my field at least, that's the make or break, is your cover letter, and it should be short. Usually a page is good, and that's your chance to really distinguish yourself from everybody else who also has Python and SQL and straight A's from the other applications. That's my, I guess, maybe a little harsher than I meant it, but it's really important. And some people don't take it seriously enough.
Use the CDO. Use the CDO. Susan is saying, seriously, use the CDO. And if you hate writing cover letters, I'm here to tell you the hate is not going to go away. I still don't like writing them, but Scott is right. A good cover letter will get someone's attention. So it gets easier to talk about yourself, but it's never the easiest thing to do. So, oh yeah, and a thank you note too. Don't forget that when you're done with interviews.
Yeah, and thanks everybody. I realize I'm sorry, I have to be the timekeeper, so I'm the one that's going to tell us. We have about 20 minutes left in this, so I believe, Susan, it's time to go into breakout rooms, right?
Yes, so I'm going to open breakout rooms now, and there's about 20 minutes where you can just, and students, you're free to move between breakout rooms if you don't see like multiple mentors. So yeah, opening it right now.
Do we have Callie in a breakout room yet?
I just moved her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that worked.
Let's see. Yep. Where are they? Yeah, it looks pretty even.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So we had, I counted 24 students at one time and 6 mentors and 2 staff. I think a few people dropped off.
Yeah, I think so too.
Willa sent an email and she
Oh.
said, she said, tell me which recording to use, number 1 or number 2, but not both. So I sent her a note and I decided to pick number 2
Okay.
because it had rows, so it had all 6 of
Oh,
the panelists.
yeah.
And this was a really good discussion, all this
Yeah.
resume and letter advice and all. I mean, they were both great.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree with you. I think this one has the like very general, like I think more questions from the student were answered in this round.
Yeah.
And it kind of cut across. It was more general questions and like resumes and interviews and cover letters. And
Stuff.
yeah, so it was good. Yeah, it was good for me because I have an interview on Tuesday. So like the talk about like storytelling and being able to defend your resume is definitely going to be helpful.
And it's something, I mean, I see a lot of science CVs, you know,
Yeah.
so I like to hear from them, you know, don't just list the PI and you know, this was the project, but like, what did you do?
Yeah, the action words, those help a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, because my interview with John Hopkins, and this is my first ever grad school interview, and so I was like pretty excited to learn the questions they're gonna ask me about, and they were asking me about like the techniques that I mentioned in the description of my research that I've done or I'm doing at Vasa, and so I would like describe the technique, but I wasn't prepared to do that because I thought that they knew it, you know, and so I kind of went into detail. And so
Mhm.
I don't know if I was supposed to do that. I don't know if they got what I was trying to explain. But it's just, yeah, but just putting those, because then now they know that like I was able to do this technique or that I was like was able to learn how to do it. And so I think yeah, so those action words and what Eric was saying about numbers and metrics, that
Yes.
I know the CDO emphasizes that a lot too. So
Right. Well, it comes across, I think, you know, we sort of give quantitative examples for econ students, like, you know, I managed to raise $15,000 or whatever, but also in the sciences, you know, quantify
yeah.
wherever you can.
Yeah, I was looking at my CV as you're saying those things just to make sure that like, okay, am I getting, but yeah, like I have like executed non-invasive surgeries on a series of 1 centimeter concussions and 6 zebra finches. And so I'm listing the number of subjects I did. I'm like giving specific info and I'm also like saying the type of animal that I did my research with. And so that's like, I think what he was talking about. So
Yeah.
yeah.
When this is over, are they coming back? They'll get the warning, there'll be 30 seconds and they'll actually come back?
Yeah, they will come back, and then maybe you can just say like thank you and kind of what you did last time too.
Yeah, I'll do a general thank you and remind them, you know, please, you know, tomorrow is the networking.
Yeah, and you can talk one-on-one with these people and follow up on your conversations and things like that. Because this is a really good resource, and I think I'm excited for tomorrow.
These are, you know, they're really cool people. They have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
I really like I didn't know, I wanted to tell her, I really like how, especially, this has nothing to do with like their expertise, but I love Danielle's background being yellow because it makes like that purple thing she's wearing really. I wanted to compliment her on her color.
Love her fashion sense. Like
It's amazing.
So I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to say to her, but I love her. I love her hair. I love the color of her hair. I love the jewelry she's putting on.
The necklace.
Yeah, the earrings, the makeup. And I love the fact that she also highlighted that there's a specific way that scientists is supposed to look or science is supposed to behave. And she's like just living her life and having fun. And it's just really nice to see that you can do that, you know, as a scientist. So yeah, pretty exciting. Yeah, and I think I saw a microscope behind Maya. I don't know if she's in the office or if she's in the lab or if she's at home or if she has a microscope at home. Yeah, I was gonna mention about just like yes, it's pretty fun.
Wow, this kind of went by fast. It really when we do this in person, it's a long, exhausting day. But I'm just, you know, I've been sitting here and enjoying the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, because usually you're supposed to stand and like walk to different places. And yeah, I remember when it was my year, I had to walk to, I think it was Rocky.
Yeah,
Yeah, if that was Major Palooza. No, Major Palooza was in the Village Room in Maine.
right.
Yeah, so SEC, yeah, SEC was in, yeah, because I remember when Christian was leading like the health and medicine, or not leading, but like co-hosting the health and medicine. Yeah, and so, yeah, and I went with my friends. And so the whole like that suggestion of going with your friends to ask mentors questions, that's something that's really helpful. Because I know like I have friends that, because over time I feel like I've worked on being able to approach people and just like random, because I'm international, and so I had to get that over with like the
Yeah,
early years of my
that's
bachelor
true.
stay. But I also have like domestic students that are my friends, and they're finding it hard, and so like we would just go together, right? Because we're interested in the same kind of
Mhm.
things, and so we'd go to the mentors and end up like getting their cards. And I know CDU used to give us like this really like
Good.
cute cute business cards, and
Yeah.
so we like also like give them ours, and it was, yeah. So
I
this is
feel
also,
like I
mhm,
feel like at tomorrow's networking, it's gonna be a little harder because you can't go with a friend. You are
yeah,
one-on-one. Now, you don't have to talk, you can chat, which
hmm,
I think is nice
yeah,
because
that's true.
although I would say, if the student is able to be on camera, it would be better to talk face to
Yeah,
face.
yeah.
I remember at one SCC a few years ago, we were in Upsy for a
Oh,
big networking thing.
mhm,
And there was a student who like was pretty much freaking out and went toward the back of Upsy, like toward the ladies' room. And I think I think the door locked behind her and I had to go get her. And
yeah,
she was really just like in a state,
wow,
she needed to take time away. It can be
yeah,
the
it could be a
big
lot.
setting can be very hard for some people. So I'm hoping that this booth thing tomorrow will make that a little easier too.
Yeah, I think it will, especially because you can chat, and so you don't really have to video chat unless you video. And even the video chat, it's not as daunting as Zoom because it's just like a small pop-up, and
Yeah,
so it's just like you just like talking. Yeah, so I think it'll
yeah,
be. I think it'll be. I think the only issue we might run into is when people start taking a lot of time in their conversations,
right.
and then like, cause the thing is at before in the in-person ones, you could have multiple people and you could just join a group
Right.
that's already talking and just kind of like, because I used to do that a lot. If I didn't have any questions, I just be like, hi, I'm just gonna like just join in and listen to the
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Yep.
But for this, it's kind of timed. So you have to kind of go
Right.
in, if you have any questions, like make that first connection, I guess, and then
Right.
like leave. And because the mentor doesn't know how important the line. And so
Yeah.
I feel like that's the only thing that might, we'll just have to see what happens tomorrow,
See
I
what
think.
happens. I know if it were me in college, I would have definitely been the type to be in a cluster with people, like a
Yeah,
clump.
yeah, 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 me too. Me too. But it's pretty, yeah. And I think what they were saying about it's easier talking about yourself when as you grow, I guess, older and as you become more experienced.
Mhm.
Yeah, because even just the past in like this interview that I had, it was just kind of tiring saying the same things because I don't think I was confident enough in the things I knew that I
Mhm.
had done. And so I feel like listening to them being so confident in like the things they did in college, and I'm just like, wow, that's like something I definitely need to work on. And I think over time, like people would,
It
yeah,
gets easier with time. None of them were as polished as they are today. Believe me, the ones I know, you know, it definitely comes with time, and eventually you stop being so self-conscious. Like, what are they thinking of me? You just kind of have to, hi, how are you? You find some things to talk about. I
yeah,
mean, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that the mentors who are new to SCC will also realize that, we tell them sophomores are nervous, they have to break the ice,
mhm,
be approachable. Just, if you recognize that the student who shows up in the booth is a little tongue tied, maybe say, where do you live on campus, by the way?
nice,
What do you do? Oh, I was part of Air Capella or
yeah,
the
yeah,
dance group or whatever. If it just turns out to be small talk about what you have in common on campus, it's still part of networking. It's still getting the social skills to
Yeah.
carry a conversation with someone that you don't know that well, or a stranger.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the CDO is I think the CDO does a really good job in that, like providing opportunities where people can get better at communicating and networking. Because before coming to Vassar, I was terrible at speaking to like seniors and people that are professionals,
Mhm.
right? Because the learning environment in Nigeria is really different.
Mhm.
It's stricter, and that
Right.
relationship is not really cordial between like
Oh,
students and professors, right? Because they're professors in our eyes, and we're just like, oh, they're so far
Mhm.
away. But coming to Vassar, where you have office hours and things like that, and then you have Major Palooza, where you can even, where the professors are now the bridge between like alumni and students. I feel like it really helps more than I think. It really,
You know
really.
what? That's so funny. You just said the word bridge, and it reminded me of something. Only 2 of these mentors were at Vassar when the bridge building was open.
Wow.
I wanted to ask the others, but I didn't want to, I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I want to ask them, like, have you even seen the bridge building? Like, do you even know what you missed?
Oh yeah, we should add maybe at the end.
Oh,
Right?
maybe I will. I'll say, who have any of you seen? Because I know that Rose and Maya probably had classes in the bridge building, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely Rose. Yeah, I think so. Rose and Maya, yeah. Maybe Maya, maybe not.
I had to actually Googled it, and I looked it up, and according to Wikipedia, it opened in 2016.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I should know this. I was here. But I don't know. It's like, it's been around for a while,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, so Danielle might not have seen it. Yeah.
Oh no. I mean, unless they came back and saw it when they were visiting or something, but
Yeah.
they would have had classes probably in Olmsted. And if they took chemistry, that was in the mud building, which got taken
Yeah,
down.
the mud. Yeah, I've had like several people that I've talk about the mud, and I'm just like, I have no idea. And I think also the D's was so different then, and I also have no idea.
The Dees was a little bit different. It got remodeled, and the way the tables and the seating are now,
I had that. Hmm.
but yeah, mud building got taken down literally brick by brick because it had a lot of glass, and it couldn't be like, it was a chemical building, so it couldn't be blown up, like just blow it up.
Yeah,
It'd be amazing to watch it.
yeah.
Well, nobody has come back in. Maybe they all figured out how to switch rooms. Let's see.
And we said that I think I said, right? I remember saying that you can switch rooms.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, I guess they're enjoying the conversation
That's good.
with the people. Yeah, I have about 5 minutes. Do you wanna send like a broadcast message to be like, we have about 5 minutes
Oh
left?
yeah, that's a good idea. All right.
If you want like last me like check in with any other mentor or anything like that.
I just feel like I'm so much more knowledgeable about Zoom.
Oh, after this, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. It's really nice to be at the behind the scenes aspect and not always be, because usually I'm a student in class and I'm just like joining the breakout rooms. But now I'm like actually creating them, and it's
Now you know what to do.
yeah. Cool stuff.
And everybody seems to be very comfortable using the chat feature, which is fine.
Yeah, I think so. I think if I were a student too, I would use the chat.
Mhm.
Just because also I think it's getting late, and so people are probably just tired, and
I'm sure.
it's easier to just put in question in the chat.
Yeah, well, I have to unfortunately run to the grocery store on the way home, and I didn't get to, Saturday is my grocery shopping day, and I could have made my husband do it, but he had things to do, so
Yeah,
do that.
yeah. I think now we can't leave campus. Starting from January 26th, it's kind of everybody's now, it's like a bubble now. So because of COVID, so they don't want people to come in and out.
Can you go, I'm sorry, can you go to the D's and pick up food?
Oh yeah, I went to do this morning. I usually don't go though because it's really cold and like super lazy to leave my tea and walk to the D's.
Yeah.
But I decided to do that this morning just because I think it was a bit sunny even though it was cold, it was still sunny. Yeah, and I think I needed the sun. I needed to go out. And so
my middle son went back up to his college yesterday, and they are quarantining in their dorms. So they have, for the first week, food delivered outside his door in a to-go bag, but they set up microwaves in the hallway for him to reheat his food.
In the hallway?
Yes.
Why not the rooms though?
I mean,
like a common room.
No, not in the, I guess not. They don't want them going to the common room. I don't know. It's,
yeah.
He doesn't mind, but.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Nice. At least there's a microwave.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. He said last night there was a bag delivered outside his door. It was like chicken fingers, macaroni and cheese, and corn or something.
You said middle school?
What's that?
You said middle school?
No, my son is in college up at Skidmore.
Okay. Oh, okay. Because for some reason, I don't know why I thought middle school, and then I was like, oh, maybe this is boarding middle school. I was just like, because I think like it's very typical here in the US for like you'd go to school and come back like during high school and middle school. But when I was growing up, I went to boarding middle school and high school. And so and I thought it's pretty common in Nigeria. And so when I came here, I found it really interesting that it's kind of the reverse.
How far away from home was your school?
It wasn't that. Luckily, it wasn't that far. It was about maybe 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so my parents there's something called visiting day. So every Sunday or Saturday of every first Sunday or Saturday of a month, like parents can come or guardians can come and see their kids and give them like food and just chat with them for a while, and then like everybody has to go back. And so it was very major event in my life, just going to boarding school. I feel like
it must have been hard being separated from your parents. Maybe you get used to it.
Yeah, but it also made me very comfortable in being away from home.
That's right.
So when I came here, it was easier for me to transition and get used to staying in a different environment and being so far away from home, which I think if I was in a day school, I would struggle a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it also just helped me in moving from place to place, like JYA and things. I've gotten just used to.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sick. And also my parents call me on WhatsApp like every day. So yeah.
If graduation's allowed to happen, do your parents already have reservations or not gonna come?
I don't even think I want them to come because of COVID.
Not worth it.
Yeah, but I would definitely video call them. Like they're going to watch it somehow, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or if it's virtual, then they could just use Zoom and learning, right? It would be so nice though if it was it was virtual and they could just like be part of the ceremony.
Yeah.
See everyone and see all the people that like taught me classes and stuff, and that'd be so cool. So I think we have about 10 seconds.
Yep, we'll be back soon. Excuse me.
Okay. So.
Oops. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's probably gonna start coming back. Okay.
And here they come.
Okay.
Here's everybody coming back. Give it a moment to see everybody coming back in. And we'll start to close out because it's already after 5. The afternoon went by very quickly. Maya's here, everybody. Okay. Just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. If all of our mentors are back. Okay. Well, what an afternoon. How about a round of applause for our panelists are amazing. Thank you so much. Many thanks to IJ for helping out, and many thanks for you students for showing up, asking great questions. Remember, you have more opportunities. Don't forget about the networking session tomorrow from 1 to 2:30, where you'll have opportunity, for additional conversation with these lovely mentors that you met today, and some other folks who are participating. So without further ado, we will bid you farewell for the evening. And again, thank you so much, everyone. Yes, we'll look out for each other, connect on LinkedIn and VassarNet, and continue these conversations. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, mentors. You guys rock.
Maya, you rock. Did a great job. You guys are phenomenal.
Maya. Yes.
I learned a lot today.
Well, because y'all made it easy for me. That's why.
Dress up, go have some wine or something, and we'll see you
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.